Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce Jonathan Butler, who will be announcing this evening's session. I want to welcome all of you to Members Weekend and tell you how pleased we all are to have you here. Jonathan, it's all yours.
Well, good evening. As Jerry said, my name is Jonathan Butler, and it really is a tremendous pleasure to be here with such a distinguished group of beautiful people, of smart people, of accomplished leaders, and so many others. I'm especially honored to sort of be sharing this stage tonight with such notable leaders as Secretary Pritzker and former Secretary Cantor. On behalf of this evening's keynote session sponsor, Sunrider International, thank you to Secretary Pritzker and to your team for your tremendous efforts as advocates for free trade, increased cross-border commerce, and expanded global market access. A little bit about Sunrider. Sunrider International is a global health and wellness brand with headquarters here in Los Angeles County and a presence in over 40 countries. It was founded in 1982 in Utah by Dr. Tei-Fu Chen, a Taiwanese-American herbalist and pharmacist, and his wife, Dr. Oi-Lin Chen, a medical doctor from Hong Kong. Sunrider now has 34 offices and 7 manufacturing centers worldwide. Sunrider's core mission is to improve the lifestyle and well-being of people around the world by creating and distributing health and wellness products with a fundamental basis in Chinese herbal tradition. Recently, the company also established itself in the hospitality space with 5 luxury hotel properties in China, Taiwan, California, and the United Kingdom. Sunrider cares about international trade because we know that exporting leads to job creation and economic vitality for our region. Our largest manufacturing facility that measures nearly 1 million square feet is located in the harbor area of Los Angeles, just a few miles north of the port complex. Roughly 60% of what we produce in that facility is exported to overseas markets. Our presence in East Asia is particularly strong, with nearly 500 Sunrider retail stores in mainland China and 130 more spread across markets such as South Korea, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Singapore. Beyond that, we also have flagship stores in far-flung cities such as Tel Aviv and Budapest. As we look at the global marketplace, and in particular towards burgeoning business opportunities in the Asia-Pacific region, we know that no other state in the country stands to benefit more from trade than California. With our headquarters here in the global crossroads that is LA, Sunrider relies heavily on stability in the global marketplace, as well as policies that facilitate increased trade and the movement of goods. Promoting market access and free trade initiatives has been a priority for our company, and we're proud of the collaborative work we've done with the Commerce Department's overseas operations at the embassies, as well as the Export Assistance Centers here in Southern California. International trade is what moves Sunrider, as we believe that as global markets continue to open up to American goods, America will benefit. Again, I'm extremely honored to be here with all of you, with so many friends, and with Secretary Pritzker. Welcome to Los Angeles. And on behalf of Sunrider International, thank you for being here with us this evening. And now, since the topic is trade, who better to introduce our speaker and moderator than our own Mickey Cantor, Director of the Pacific Council and former U.S. Trade Representative and Secretary of Commerce. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Cantor.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate that very much. And thank you to Sunrider for doing this. And thank you all for being here. It's a great crowd. And this is going to be a tremendous session. It'll be both fun and interesting, and we'll all learn something. I'm really pleased that Ann Simmons is here. Ann writes for the Washington Post and covered international affairs for quite a long time. Including the breakup of the Soviet Union, I think you covered that. And the embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania, the war in Iraq. She even covered Warren Christopher, who was our founder of the Pacific Council, when he was Secretary of State. And thank God she never covered USTR or Commerce, because I would have been in big trouble. This is really, everybody says it's a pleasure. You're going to introduce somebody. Everybody says the same thing. This really is. For two reasons. Penny Pritzker is a friend. and she is doing a fabulous job as Secretary of Commerce. And let me tell you, it makes me feel good to have someone who your successor is so great, makes you look good. And it's hard to make me look good, let me tell you. So we're delighted to have Penny here. You know she's from Chicago. You know what she did there philanthropically and in business. Penny has been an all-out advocate for opening markets, for the U.S. leading the world and setting the rules of trade. Let me say something about free trade. I can't stand the term. It's rules-based trade is what we want, not free trade. There's no such thing as free trade. Penny has been an all-out advocate for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, as she should be. Let me tell you, folks, we have got to get our heads on straight about this. We have 11 nations, or is it 12?
12 of
12
us,
with
including
us.
us.
11 nations, including us, in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It sets the rules of trade in one of the fastest growing region in the world, which is Asia, which is our future. Now, do we want to have trade without rules? Who gets hurt when there are no rules? It's the United States of America that gets hurt when there are no rules. We play by the rules, so we need to set them. And if we don't, all of you can guess who is going to set them in Asia. And I don't need to name the country. So all I need to say to you is this. You've got someone who is a great advocate for it, has been so successful, has gone to, 38 countries, I think, since you've been secretary. I think I maybe got to Japan and China. That was about it. They wouldn't let me go anywhere else. As Fred Roosevelt would say, that was a good thing. And so it is a delight for me to introduce to you the Secretary of Commerce of the United States, Penny Pritzker, and Ann Simmons of the Washington Post.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Madam Secretary, I'd like to thank you also for taking the time to speak with us this evening.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Great.
Thanks for inviting me, everyone.
Great. Well, I'd like to start with kind of a general question because there's kind of a lot of apprehension around the world with regards to the global economy. The UK exited the European Union. There's a level of slow growth in certain parts of the world. There's rising debt. How do you characterize the state of the global economy right now at this particular juncture? What's your outlook?
Well, I think first let's step back for a minute and look at where are we in the United States. You know, we're in our 8th year of expansion. Real GDP has grown about 2.1% on average since 2009. And there's some bright spots. We had 156,000 jobs created by the private sector. Actually more jobs than that because we had the public sector actually decline in terms of jobs in September. And that's about 15.3 million jobs created by the private sector since 2010. Hourly earnings are up about 2.8% in 2016. And we had some really good news, which is real median household income is up over 5% between 2014 and 2015. So, but growth has slowed. You know, we're seeing about the last quarter, 1.4% growth in the United States. And a lot of the challenges that we face are because global growth has slowed. You know, China has slowed. I think Europe as a whole is doing okay, relatively speaking, but the uncertainty created by Brexit has created a lot of volatility. And I think that UK is waking up to the cost of Brexit, and they're really, finally someone's talking about what are the ramifications of that, and that's not great for global trade. So we need to be more proactive as a country in terms of helping not only our economy, but also, frankly, the global economy, and that's one of the reasons we've been so aggressive also on, aside from the Trans-Pacific Partnership and rules-based trade agreements, but also on foreign direct investment and really trying to attract foreign direct investment because these are the components that can help improve growth in the United States and create jobs.
Well, before we get
Here.
to the TPP and also to foreign direct investment, do you feel then, from what you said, that that fears of a possible global recession are justified or not?
Well, I don't know if we'll see a global recession or not. That's 2 quarters of negative growth.
Right.
We just seem to be in an area, I think the IMF and others are predicting kind of a 2.5% to 3% global growth, which is okay, but not, we could see more. And it's one of the reasons that, one has to question the amount of austerity that's been going on in Europe, and the question is what should be the policies that can help improve the global economic situation. And certainly here in the United States, there's policies that we've been unsuccessful at getting done. Tax reform, comprehensive immigration reform, a significant increase in infrastructure investment. Not sure what your roads look like here, but the roads around the country and the bridges and our broadband and other things need investment.
Right.
And we're not doing that. I know there's some proposition on the ballot about infrastructure here, but we need more of that going on, forward-leaning about investing in this country. It will pay dividends in terms of economic growth for the country.
Well, I wanted to go then to TPP, since that's quite a controversial topic and one that people are talking about, quite dynamic. And you recently remarked, if I might read a direct quote from you.
That's terrifying.
Right. Don't worry, it's a good one. If we cannot cross the finish line with TPP, the 11 other countries who negotiated with us, and in many cases made great sacrifices to reach this agreement, will be forced to rethink that faith in US leadership. So if you can elaborate a bit more on what's at stake if TPP does not pass, how does that impact America?
Well, think about the following. The United States has really led the TPP negotiation, insisting that we have high labor standards, high environmental standards, that there's free flow of information on the internet, there's not data localization, that there's a chapter on small and medium-sized businesses so that your businesses don't get caught up in customs or volatility or tax volatility. For these countries, and think of the agricultural access that's been negotiated as part of TPP. So for our farmers to be able to sell their goods by lowered tariffs into these markets. And TPP includes 18,000 tariffs that would go away for American products in the TPP countries. So imagine you're a leader in those countries. You've convinced your populace that this is a good idea and gone ahead and proceeded. And now, where let's say you're in Japan and you've agreed to reduce tariffs 40% so U.S. poultry could be sold there, or you're in Vietnam and you're going to reduce car tariffs or auto tariffs 70%. And now the United States can't follow through or doesn't follow through for political purposes or whatever. That really, and you've heard several of the leaders in the Asia-Pacific region say quite explicitly, hey, look, if you're not in the game, we're going to have to look to others that we can rely on who are in the Asia-Pacific region. So I think U.S. leadership is an issue that we cannot ignore when we go out to pursue rules-based trade and to put the United States in a better position, good for our workers, good for our companies, and then we don't follow through. That's a problem.
So how do you address the public and private anxiety that still exists about TPP? That not even the two main presidential candidates are on board.
Well, I think there's really 2 ways to address the issue. First is to talk about what are the benefits of TPP and why we should pursue it. What are the economic benefits? Access to new markets, tariffs coming down, red tape going away, making it more competitive for American labor by raising labor standards in other countries. You talk also about the national security benefits of TPP, the fact that the greater U.S. presence in the Asia-Pacific region gives the United States more impetus to be patrolling the seas or to protecting territorial integrity, and by knitting our economies together and knitting our peoples together, there's less likely to be extremism against the United States. And by helping those countries grow their own economies, you're also helping them deal with unemployment and potential extremism. That's one way to address this issue. But I think we have to acknowledge the anxiety that exists in the United States. We can't ignore it. But I believe that this anxiety is really driven not by trade, because trade supports exports in the United States, support 11.6 million jobs in this country. We don't want those to go away. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the anxiety, I think, that's created by globalization and automation and digitization. And globalization is the reality. Our companies and our workers are competing in a global environment. There are other providers. So why don't we want to make it easier for our companies to have access to those markets, bringing down barriers, bringing down tariffs? And then the issues of automation and digitization are, you know, I don't know about you, it's a little terrifying figuring out how to use all this technology. And imagine as your job changes and you're working more and more with machines in your job, that is unnerving. But that's why it's so important. And the Obama administration's been so focused on workforce training, on apprenticeships, on digital training, on mid-career retraining, if you will, and making all of that affordable and available locally, and making sure that when we're doing any kind of training, that it is leading to a job. It's not train, as our Secretary of Labor would say, we're not trying to train and pray. But we have to address all of that. And then finally, the other thing I would say is enforcement. You can't have a trade agreement that is something that is believable or something you can rely upon if there isn't strong enforcement. And the good news is Congress has given more resources, certainly to us at the Department of Commerce, to do anti-dumping and countervailing duties. And they've promised more resources to the U.S. Trade Rep. And with that means we're putting tariffs in place on countries and companies from foreign countries that are dumping here in the United States. We have the most duties in place that we've had. We have the most aggressive approach that we've had at the department. And the U.S. Trade Rep has brought more cases in the WTO than we've brought in our history, and winning those cases. So, you know, you need all of that. You can't just look and talk about one little part of the picture. I think we need to look at the whole picture.
Well, you've spoken about kind of the need to have good standards and quality control. Number one, why isn't that message getting across? Because all that you've said, these are really strong arguments, really logical. The message isn't getting across. And number two, China isn't included in this particular agreement. They've actually come up with their own regional agreement. How does that rival TPP? So if you can start.
Well, I think that that's the other point that ought to be made, and I appreciate your bringing it up, which is it's not like the status quo is going to be maintained. There have been 100 free trade agreements in the Asia-Pacific region since the year 2000. Don't include the United States. And China is out with a competing agreement to TPP called the RCEP that doesn't have the kind of protections against state-owned enterprises or against or forcing our trading partners to have better labor standards or environmental standards or digital, making digital access easy so that small companies can, we've crafted a number of chapters that make it much easier for small businesses. Think of an Etsy provider, somebody who's running a business out of their garage or out of their den. They have access to the market because of the internet. And they also have, but it's not real for them if they can't get through customs and can't have, transparent taxes and all of this other basic blocking and tackling that large companies have much greater infrastructure to execute against. So, this is, I think the fact that this is not an easy story to tell in 3 sound bites. It's a story that requires a belief that if given a level playing field, American workers and American companies can compete globally. And that's what we're trying to do. And this is an agreement that has many benefits, but we're fighting the ghosts of the past. We're fighting deals of the past that maybe didn't have the kind of standards that we have in this agreement, nor the commitment to enforcement.
And so are you optimistic at this particular juncture? That
my job is to be optimistic, right. And my job is to work on the President's behalf to get done what he, and we're very focused. This administration is absolutely committed to trying to get this done in the lame duck period.
Right. Let's move on to foreign direct investment. We're in the middle of a presidential campaign, and the tone of the rhetoric has become increasingly protectionist. First of all, explain to us the importance of direct investment to the US economy.
So there are about 12 million Americans that get up every morning and go to work at an American subsidiary of a foreign company. Those companies make they make products that we consume here in the United States, but they also export about $360 billion worth of goods and services. These are foreign companies investing here in the United States. So President Obama had, said this is a good thing and we should do more of it. So he directed, through a program called Select USA, the Department of Commerce to create actually a new organization to work on foreign direct investment because it's good for our economy. And I'm not talking about mergers and acquisitions, I'm talking about greenfield investment in the United States. And so we've worked on about $22 billion worth of deals in the United States. We've helped all kinds of companies. And what we do is, for the companies, we help them establish operations here in the United States. We help them navigate federal rules, and we help introduce them to the economic development organizations in states across the country. And we can't prefer one state over the other. We love all our children equally. For the cities and states, what we do is we're helping attract new investment into cities and states, and we're helping them identify their strengths and put together a strategy to attract foreign direct investment, and then we're connecting them with partners. And and then finally what we're doing is trying to work on policies that improve America's competitiveness, like TPP, like a skilled workforce, like advanced manufacturing, that make the United States, for the last 4 years in a row, the United States has been according to A.T. Kearney, the #1 place in the world to invest. That's good for us. That's good for our economy. It's good for everyone in this room.
Well, some critics say that, for example, by allowing foreigners to invest in this country to kind of purchase not only kind of financially but physical assets, that they can have some kind of influence on American domestic policy and international policy. Is that a justified fear?
I think that I have not seen that kind of any kind of negative influence. What I've seen is job creation. And now, is there somebody who may try to have undue influence? Maybe. But that's not the norm. And I don't think we should be afraid of foreign direct investment because there's some kind of ghost that we're afraid of. I think what we should think about is, how do we continue to make the United States the #1 place to invest? What's important? Rule of law, our investment in research and development, the fact that we have 15 of the top 25 universities in the world, the fact that we have strong intellectual property protection, the fact that we have the best workforce in the world, an extraordinarily productive workforce. These are assets that countries are envious of. We have an amazingly innovative economy. We have rules that encourage people to start new businesses. We allow you to fail. Most countries, you can't start a business and fail. You're either ostracized socially or sometimes you're put in jail.
Right. Well then, I would ask then that are investors becoming really cautious because of, again, this protectionist rhetoric. You know, they're
Well,
hearing
I don't
that.
think the protectionist rhetoric is helping us sell ourselves.
Right.
And so I think that it's not, that's unfortunate at this moment.
But you haven't seen any specific kind of implicated
I don't have
drawbacks from
specific
that,
examples of companies that have said we don't want to
Right.
invest in the United States because of it. But, you know, people are, I've traveled, as Mickey said, I've probably been, Mickey, now to over 40 countries in the world, and some I go to multiple times a year, and they do ask what is going on in the United States.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall to see how you answer that.
And as Secretary of Commerce, I can't comment on our
Right.
political elections, but I do try and say, take the long view.
Well, I understand that U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services recently proposed a new program that would allow foreign entrepreneurs to receive temporary residency visas in this country. And how does backing that type of policy actually support the U.S. economy?
Well, you know, one of the challenges that we have is we have not been able to get comprehensive immigration reform passed in this country. And so as a result, there are, you know, over 50% of the students who are master's and PhD students in STEM fields in this country are from another country. And when they're done, we ask them to leave. Rather than start their company here in the United States, which they would like to do, we say, thank you very much, please go home. And so the Department of Homeland Security has this an international entrepreneurship rule, which says if you've started a company and you've gotten several $100,000 of investment and you're growing jobs, that you as an entrepreneur can stay in the United States for 2 years, and if it's working, you can stay another 3 years. It's a proposed rule.
Right.
This is not nirvana. This is not a solution to getting comprehensive immigration reform, but this is an effort to say we should not sit still and say to all this talent, please leave. It's crazy. It's not good for our economy. It's not good for our workforce. It's not, you know, these are 40% of the Fortune 500 were started by immigrants or children of immigrants. You know, you know, I think from 2006 to 2012, over a third of U.S. companies that were financed by VCs had an immigrant founder. And those companies created 60,000 jobs here in the United States during that period, and had $17 billion worth of sales. You know, why are we encouraging these people to leave? This is a good thing for our country.
Let's move on again to China, since you brought up China earlier. It's the US's largest trading partner. It invests tens of billions of dollars in the United States' economy every year. However, you recently noted that the US-China relationship needs work. Kind of, it's an understatement that it needs work. But how can we greater kind of strengthen the ties between the US and China?
We have a complex relationship as a country with China, and there are tensions and there are areas of cooperation. And you know, look, given that China is the #2 largest economy in the world, we have to have sustained commercial engagement with China. We can't ignore China. It's not in anyone's best interest, for both from a commercial standpoint and obviously from a geopolitical standpoint. We've found common ground in a number of areas. The Paris Agreement. Really, China came together with the United States. They were the first, you know, we are the 2 biggest emitters of carbon, and we came together and really began the process of getting the Paris Agreement, which has just gone into effect in the last week or so, kicked that off together. That's a very big accomplishment and a partnership that occurred with China and many others. Now 77 countries have agreed to the Paris Agreement. We have a shared interest in regional global security, including fighting ISIS, including peacekeeping, including assisting refugees. We just are completing in November the year of U.S.-China Year of Travel and Tourism that had led to 18% growth year over year in visits to the United States. We had 2.6 million Chinese visit the United States, and they spent $30 billion here. That's an export. You know, that those visits are considered exports. And since we changed the China visa to 10-year visa, in our visa, we get 10-year visas from China, you've seen a 53% increase in Chinese applications for visas to the United States. So we made a lot of progress, and I'm simply going to address predominantly the commercial relationship. We still have very significant areas of challenge. Intellectual property protection is a significant problem. Cybersecurity is a big issue. State-owned enterprise reform is something that has not come in a form or fashion or speed that one had hoped for, given the third plenum and some of the announcements that have been made by China. And obviously the big challenge that we're seeing today in the South China Sea. These are areas of, you know, tension between our countries, and that in government, our job is to work on those things. And so we'll have we have a meeting, we meet twice a year with the Chinese in these big formal meetings called, and the one that's coming up is the Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade. And so we'll meet with the Vice Premier. They're coming here in this meeting. We just had the Strategic and Economic Dialogue in June with the Chinese, which is another big engagement. Dialogues are when governments meet, and they're supposed to occur. They basically both are, you account for what you've accomplished, and you set the agenda between the two countries for the next year. Sometimes those are cooperative meetings, and sometimes they can be contentious. But we've been looking for ways to, you know, another problem we have is excess capacity with China. China is producing enormous amounts of steel, excess steel, and it's leading to one of the reasons we have so many dumping tariffs out now is because of that excess steel. And they have excess capacity that's 4 times the U.S. steel manufactured, just their excess capacity. So those are challenges that we're working on. They've agreed to a global steel forum. They've agreed to some reductions, but not significant enough.
Right. Just to back up a bit, you mentioned dialogue and that type of cooperation, and you've also referred to something called commercial diplomacy. What exactly is that in terms of being a tactic for kind of engaging abroad?
So the concept of commercial diplomacy is the idea of trying to harness America's unmatched commercial presence around the world and power around the world, and use that when there's an alignment between the policy desires of American business and our U.S. government to work together with foreign governments to try and change policy. And the idea came from sort of 3 observations that we had. First is the global emphasis on inequality and job creation. Countries around the world want American companies. They want your businesses. And the reason they do is, first of all, the quality of our products, but also we often set a great example of how to operate in a foreign country, and we operate by rules that often are not the norm in those countries. And so we're setting an example, and many of your businesses also make social commitments in those countries, and so that's a good thing. The second observation is the demand for U.S. companies, goods, and services is, I haven't met a leader of a country that hasn't said, I would like more foreign direct investment from the United States. And the third is this overlapping policy agenda, whether it's protecting trade secrets and intellectual property, or increasing market access, or lowering trade barriers. Those are issues that are important to American companies, but they're also important to the United States in trying to create a rules-based trading system where the United States can compete. I mean, if we're given a level playing field, we believe we can compete together. We believe, given the extensive reach of American business and globalization, that U.S. companies can be influential partners with the U.S. government in helping to affect policy in other countries. And we've put this practice to work in Africa, in Tunisia, in Ukraine, in Asia, And, we've seen results.
You also mentioned cybersecurity. In this digital technological age, it's probably one of the greatest threats that we're facing. What kind of threat is it with regards to US businesses?
Well, cybersecurity is a huge challenge for both government and the private sector. And anybody who's in business here, and I'm sure there are many of you, even if you're not, if you're running an NGO, how'd you like to be running the DNC right now? Cybersecurity is a very, very serious challenge. And the thing is, this is not a challenge that we can address where government does it by itself or private sector can handle it by itself. In fact, the internet is ubiquitous, but cybersecurity is the only domain where we ask private companies to defend themselves against foreign countries. And that's a problem. And we as in government should have a solemn obligation to protect our people against systemic threats to our economic and our national security. That's kind of a fundamental premise of government. The challenge we face is that the regulatory and legislative structures that we have are not set up to deal with the dynamic nature of the challenge of cybersecurity. It means that we need more ways that we come together and work together. We've got to have a different kind of collaborative approach. And the president has called for, has created a commission, a cybersecurity commission, that's due to make its report, really laying a map and menu for the next administration for how do we take on cybersecurity enforcement, given the fact that it's as big an issue for the private sector as it is for government. We at the Department of Commerce play a significant role in that area. We created what's called the National Institute of Standards and Technology, created with the private sector the cybersecurity framework. That's the language we use among all of us to talk about the threats. It's the vocabulary, it's the matrix that we use. In your boardrooms, you're using that to analyze what your posture is in cybersecurity. We also run something called the Cybersecurity Center for Excellence, where we come together with the private sector to solve technical problems in cybersecurity. So think about, how do you make a police car cyber secure? How do you make an IV that's networked cyber secure? How do we deal with autonomous vehicles and those being cyber secure? These are big technological challenges where the public and private sector are coming together. We need more mechanisms of collaboration. We're also short about 200,000 cybersecurity workers in this country. And so we at the department have created with academic institutions, curricula for cybersecurity workforce. And we've just given out a number of grants for different educational institutions to bring those into functioning.
Will that ensure a certain number of personnel come out of these
That's the hope,
schools?
But really what you want is you kind of want it to go viral, right? You want the curricula to go viral, and you want institutions all over this country to be adopting the curricula so that we can begin to produce enough of a workforce. We need it across the entire country, and certainly we need it in the federal government.
Is there a dollar figure that shows what American companies are losing because of cybersecurity threats?
You know, I think there have been estimates. I don't have my those at the top at my fingertips, but I could get that.
And has the private sector been quite willing then to collaborate with the government?
Well, yes, in many instances, but we need to create mechanisms where it's not you collaborate and then you get penalized for any kind of violation.
Right.
So there's issues that need to be addressed. Some have been addressed by cybersecurity legislation, creating immunity and liability protection and things like that. But it's a work in progress.
Let's move to the issue of refugees. It's one that's quite close to my heart. I cover the kind of refugees and resettlement. I've been to several refugee camps around the world, and I understand that recently you chaired the White House's, is it Call to Action Refugee Panel? What came out of that? And if you can touch on how US companies are actually playing a role in terms of helping to aid refugees.
Well, as I assume folks are aware, we've got over 20 million refugees in the world right now, and we've got 5 million Syrian refugees just from Syria who are displaced. And so the call to action was really to support refugees coming to the United States. We have about 85,000, over 85,000 this year, and I think the president has called for 110,000 next year. So companies like Airbnb or Chobani or Western Union, my point is to give a few examples. These are in very different businesses. They didn't just put up money, they also were leveraging their corporate assets, whether it was creating temporary housing to host refugee families or a micro-loan program to help refugees be able to start businesses, because as I've told you, immigrants, and many of these folks who are refugees, they were very sophisticated and had businesses of their own. Or healthcare products. There are companies that have given healthcare products to newly arriving refugees, or educational support or mental health support. So there was a wide variety of companies that participated and made pledges to support the refugee population. And I'll just say something, corporate America at times is under a lot of pressure from for what is their role in society, and who are their stakeholders. And one of the things that's been really heartening in this administration is the amount of partnership from corporate America that we've seen in issues like refugees in so many different areas. And I think that as the role of the corporation is evolving, I think we swung maybe too far that our only stakeholder was the shareholder. I think corporations, and I come from the private sector, really are seeing their role in more holistic members of the domestic and global community. I think that's a really positive thing that's happening.
It's so interesting because the US has actually been criticized for not doing more, and wealthy nations have been criticized for not doing more. I don't think people always kind of look at what the private sector's doing. A report came out recently from Amnesty that said that those 21 million refugees, half of them live in just 10 countries in the world, and they are low and middle income countries with a GDP of something like 2.5% of the world economy. So in terms of the US doing more, what's your view? You've seen it from from both the private side and the federal side.
You'd like the United States to be more bold, but we're struggling to deal with the immigrants that we have. We can't get comprehensive immigration reform done. You would think in comprehensive immigration reform there would be more room to deal with the refugee problem as well. We're a big country, and frankly, our unemployment is down in the 5% range, and you leaders are creating great jobs in this country. I think we could. We should think about our role. It was quite bold what Chancellor Merkel did to say we're going to take 1 million refugees. Politically, that's very hard to do, but it's probably more consistent with morally who we think we are than the number of refugees we're actually taking.
And are there indications, Madam Secretary, that after the kind of initial burden, for lack of a better word, the burden of resettlement of refugees, there are long-term benefits, and refugees actually can help boost the economy? I understand that your own personal family migration story might speak to this.
Well, my family immigrated 135 years ago, but as I said my family came from Kyiv. I said to the president of Ukraine, current president, I said, you don't really want families like mine leaving. So you really want, productive ambitious and entrepreneurial and innovative. I'm not talking about me or my family, but I think there are many refugees. I think this idea of painting with a broad brush doesn't make any sense. But I'm probably out of my depth. That's not my portfolio, but those are my personal feelings.
Well, Madam Secretary, I think we're going to move to Q&A since I
would
know
love
there've
that.
got to be quite a few questions in the audience. And if I might just say, if you could ask a direct question and not make a statement, as I'd like to steal a line from my esteemed colleague Pat Morrison, who says that if you want to make a statement, please run for the presidency next 4 years, okay? So I'd like to start with the gentleman in the middle over here.
Yes.
I think this gentleman, and then you, sir. Great, and then we'll...
Madam Secretary, thanks for being here. That's my only statement.
Thank you.
Okay. You mentioned the TPP and that you hope to have it passed in the lame duck session. Do you have the votes? And if not, and Hillary Clinton becomes the president, are there concessions that you could see being made with the current deal that would give her the political cover to sign the TPP?
I think that it's not just the presidency that you need to think about. I think you need to think about what will be the makeup of the House and the Senate. And I think there are potential concessions that we're working on now that might make TPP maybe more palatable during the lame duck. We're particularly, making sure, for example, that the pharmaceutical industry is comfortable, that they have the kind of intellectual property protection that's within the agreement, that it's really bankable for them. So there's things that we're working on right now that I think can enhance the agreement, but we're not we're going to reopen this agreement and renegotiate it. I mean, you all are negotiators of one form or fashion in this room. Imagine trying to come to a deal with 12 countries. It's very difficult. And so I think that the United States has done well, and we were advised all along by business leaders on every chapter. So it's not like there's some impression like we just were giving away the store. That's not true. We worked very hard to make sure that we were meeting the goals and objectives of the different sectors of the economy.
I'd like to take this gentleman here and then move to the other side of the room. This gentleman
My
here.
name is Simon Simonian, and my name is Simon Simonian. I do thank you for the progress that you related, that the United States has made in international rules regarding the TPP and the Chinese rules with some other maybe 10, 20 countries in their own sphere. However, as we know, the world has 195 countries. Where are the other 170 countries in this planning for international rules, particularly the poor countries that need resources, factories, in order to produce their own goods and to rise from poverty? So we have a world of peace, justice, and harmony.
Absolutely. So one of the Trans-Pacific Partnership is an open architecture agreement, meaning if you as a country meet the standards within the agreement, then you can become eligible to join the agreement, once it's passed among the original parties. And so that's an aspiration. That's a wonderful opportunity from this agreement to say to the rest of the world, agree to minimum wage for your labor. Agree not to deforest or overfish. Agree that you're not going to have data localization, but instead have free flow of information. Agree that you're going to have understandable customs and taxes. You too can be a part of this agreement. So it's not meant to be just those 12 countries. It's meant to welcome the rest of the world to trade in a high standard way. It's what Secretary Cantor was saying, which is that it's about rules-based trade is what we're trying to accomplish.
I'll take a question from the lady in the center here, please.
I'm Jane Harmon. I'm a Pacific Council wannabe. So back to TPP. Well, first a comment. Mickey Cantor is the gold standard for USTR and Commerce Secretary, but I think maybe we could have a dual gold standard for Commerce Secretary. On TPP, Penny, most people think that the lame duck session is the best opportunity. And some of us who were pro-trade members of Congress know how hard it is for people to vote for this. it has been recommended by people like Carla Hills, former USTR, that a retail campaign really needs to be made. It's not just pointing to changes that could be made in the annexes without changing the text of the agreement and all that, but it is people showing up in the offices of members of Congress who say that if this doesn't pass, I will lose my job. I think that's the ammunition that's needed. So my question is, what efforts can you make, the administration, and what efforts can you get the Chamber of Commerce and other groups that have a shared interest with you to make to do this retail campaign ASAP so that the votes could be there to pass it?
Well, I think, Jane, you know, we need to make, this trade deals are hard, as you know, and as Mickey knows, they're very difficult to get passed, even in the best of times. And so what I would say is that we are working with the Business Roundtable and the Chamber and others to have a more aggressive as well as retail campaign for TPP during the lame duck session. But to be honest, retail means you guys in this room. Retail doesn't mean, it means you talking to your employees and saying, this is important, jobs in our companies depend on it. It doesn't mean, I can't ask you to lobby, but I can ask you to make your voices heard. And the point is that if your voices aren't heard, this window will come and go.
The gentleman in the middle in the black shirt.
And this opportunity will come.
Madam Secretary, welcome to Los Angeles.
Hello, Michael.
Good to be with you again. So we've talked a lot about the TPP. We're in California. Latinos are the largest ethnic group, racial group in the state. Mexico is our largest export market. I can't let you leave, even though we'll have Ambassador Jacobson and Ambassador Sala here tomorrow talking about the U.S.-Mexico relationship. Donald Trump has said he wants to tear up NAFTA. It's the worst, quote-unquote, trade deal he's ever seen. A, would you please speak to that and the success or failure of NAFTA in your assessment and what the TPP will do for that relationship? And more importantly, B, what you, and thank you for your leadership with the high-level economic dialogue, what you have done with this administration to strengthen the U.S.-Mexico relationship and what advice you'd have for the next administration on that front.
Well, if you think about national security, you know, we have a country we share, I think it's a 2,000-mile border with, called Mexico. And the fact that what's happened as a result of NAFTA is that we've, and the ambassador just arrived, that's great. She knows more than I do. Anyway, you know, look, as a result of NAFTA, 40% of everything that's exported out of Mexico is a U.S. product. I mean, we are intertwined in ways that is, from a supply chain, that is very positive. We have businesses where we actually have mapped our supply chains. We've done cluster mapping to show how, you know, a business, how you can take advantage of the close relationship of production between the United States and Mexico. That's good for the United States. Stability on our southern border is good for the United States. And we, you know, we're benefiting from that relationship overall. Did some people lose jobs? Yes. Do we have an obligation to those people who might have lost a job from NAFTA? Absolutely, as a country. But we can't ignore the fact that we do have globalization. We do have globally intertwined supply chains. We need to make sure that they're competitive so the United States is winning. So in terms of trade with Mexico, during our tenure and during this administration and certainly during my tenure, we've worked very hard on something called the high-level economic dialogue. And the goal is to make it easier to do, you know, for flights to go back and forth, make it easier. We've worked on we opened the first new railroad border crossing between the United States and Mexico in 100 years. Our trade, just in the last 20 years since NAFTA, has grown sixfold with Mexico, and we had no additional railroad crossings. It's sort of crazy, but we hadn't gotten these things done. We've expanded a number of other crossings so that goods and services are moving back and forth more easily and more quickly, making it easier to grow jobs in both of our countries. So it's a very important economic and national security relationship, and Mexico has been a good partner to us in many ways during the Peña Nieto administration, which I've seen firsthand. And so I'm a big believer in that, we want, I think both of our economies can rise with TPP. I think we can both benefit. The Mexican government is looking at changing their constitution to improve their labor standards because of TPP. That doesn't happen if there's no TPP. Now, that's not how they're selling it in their country, but basically there was a big impetus for a change in their constitution. And so this is a good thing. It's a good thing for American workers. Makes us more competitive.
So sorry, we only have time for one last question. The gentleman at the back, please.
Could you please address the potential Chinese buyout of a major Hollywood motion picture studio and its implications on content? Is that something the government should get involved with?
So I don't know if that is a potential CFIUS case or not. CFIUS is our process of reviewing the purchase, not just by China, but by any country's company, of something that might be of national security interest. So I don't know if that's part of it or not. So I can't really elucidate much on that deal right now.
Madam Secretary, thank you so much for your time. You've been very gracious. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.